Okay, I want to dedicate a video to exploring. I don't really have it all down pat. I don't have this exactly figured out. But I think just more sharing, kind of exploring this topic out loud. I sat in on a satsang recently, and this person brought forward this experience she was having, where she felt she was getting kind of asked by God, asked by the divine, she was getting these prompts that were very crazy, insane, kind of irrational, but that she was just leaping off the cliff, that she was just jumping in and surrendering, and even if it just seemed totally irrational, just going for it, jumping off the cliff. That these prompts were coming up. There was kind of a pressure to do this, and then she just said, I'm just surrendering more and more. I'm not even questioning it. I'm just surrendering it. And she was expressing it, I can say, in a positive light. It seemed for her that she was seeing that she was being met and held by grace, and there was a net to catch her every time she did it, like Indiana Jones. What is that? Is that the Holy Grail? Where he steps out into the void and he finds there's like an invisible bridge. Anyways, whatever image you want to use, but and the teacher was very affirming of this person and the experience, and saying, yeah, path is irrational, God is irrational. And I see that as, I don't totally agree with that teaching. Again, it's sort of hard to say. I just felt like there needed to be. I'm kind of using that experience. I felt sort of, I guess, triggered in a sense, or just raised some red flags for me, that I kind of wanted to speak into this issue a little bit, having had some experience with it, and offer, some, what I didn't feel was fully offered there. It's sort of hard when you share anything, period. I did this video about every form casts a shadow. I'm just realizing I should have cleared up some space, because this might be a longer video. So I might get cut off at some point and have to do a part 2. But anyways, every form casts a shadow, and that is a powerful teaching, points to something powerful about reality. It's like God is perfection. God is seamless, boundless wholeness. Formless eternity. But any limitation, any delimitation, what's the difference between those two words? Anytime we create a form, no matter how enlightened its founding, how enlightened the ideals behind something we create, no matter how high, vibrationally something comes through, every form, it casts some kind of a shadow. And you can think about that sort of in the abstract, just of like God being the sun, right? And any kind of form you put in front of that is going to cast a shadow on everything on the other side of that. So the clouds, you've got the sun coming in, the clouds doesn't stop the sun from shining, but it casts a shadow on the surface of the earth. Anyways, I don't need to go into that whole thing again, but yeah, so many dimensions that this teaching applies to, every form casting a shadow. And it's actually something I believe I got this notion, this idea, I think I got from this same teacher. But so when you share a teaching, or when you share a perspective on the path, it's always partial, it's always incomplete, it's always kind of a concession to relativity, a concession to apparent reality, and it usually comes as a corrective to a misalignment, something that's out of alignment, and you speak a truth to help bring balance, to address a particular issue. And so that's why it's important to be discerning how you hear a teaching, and if it applies to your life, great, and if it doesn't, just, dust the dirt off your feet, keep moving. You can disregard or say, this teaching isn't for me right now. So I guess I'm just trying to acknowledge that sometimes when somebody shares something, the absolute truth, the capital T, is beyond category. It's the ground out of which everything arises and is beyond speech, beyond the ability to put any kind of parameter or constraint on it. But yeah, sometimes, you speak a truth, and it may be very, like, a teacher may have a sense that for this individual, because they have a relationship there, this is a very good teaching for them, this is the right thing for them, that they need to be more willing to throw caution to the wind. They need to be more willing to step out on a limb, to step out of their ordinary patterns. So yeah, I get that, and that's certainly a possibility here. And it doesn't really matter. It kind of doesn't, but it doesn't. I'm just using this experience to share what I want to share and to kind of balance out that idea. And you've got all these, balance out the idea of God giving you like an irrational prompt, and you just take a leap of faith. And that idea is well attested to mythically, archetypically, spiritually. I can think of so many examples. I guess one of the main one that comes to mind is Abraham. I think maybe I started thinking about this when I read Soren Kierkegaard. I don't know what I guess I thought I was an intellectual or something, but Fear and Loathing, I think, was the book. I think it's in there. He talks about Abraham in the Bible. I guess that must be in Genesis, that God instructs Abraham to take his son Isaac, I think, up to a high place on top of a mountain, I think, on top of a hill, and he was to sacrifice his son. And how horrific, that you couldn't really imagine a more horrific prompting or faith test, trial that God could give somebody. And eventually Abraham says, okay, this is how I'm remembering it. I haven't read Genesis in a long time, and it's been even longer since I read that Fear and Loathing. Is that what it's called? Now I'm thinking maybe that's Hunter S. Thompson. Fear and Trembling, I think is what it's called. Anyways, this is just how I'm remembering it. And Abraham agrees to do it. surrenders to God's will and says, okay, thy will, O Father, O God. And I think he has the knife, and he's got his son Isaac, and he's going to kill him. And then at the last minute, God stays his hand. God stops him from doing it, intervenes and says, you don't need to do that. And that it was like a test of faith. It's like this archetypical story. And yeah, then there's just so many examples, and there's a truth that it points to on one level for sure. Because the path takes courage. The path takes doing something that is countercultural. You're swimming against the tide of our karmic conditioning, our collective madness, to heal, to seek God, to surrender to God. Basically, it almost inherently implies doing something, I don't know about irrational, maybe that's where I'm getting hung up, transrational. There's a deeper, you could say there's a deeper rationality, but on the surface seems unconventional, unorthodox, to put it one way. It all depends on what altitude you're speaking from, what plane you're speaking from, what depth you're speaking of, what perspective you're holding when you're talking about these things. So again, it's like, that's one of the dangers, I think I was trying to say, about speaking out any teaching, any wisdom, any advice, any experience, is that it is not universally applicable. You can speak truths that are more universal, that get closer to the truth, that point to a more universal dimension, but there's so many ways for our confusion to latch onto that and to warp it, to, you know, the hurt places, to mishear something, to misapply something. And so, yeah, you as a person who is healing and who is valuing, prioritizing truth, there, you have to be discerning, and it's good to have a second opinion. Yeah, before I get into more specifics about this, let me just say, and I should have just said this up front probably, the whole message, if I could distill what I'm trying to say here, is get a second opinion, get a third opinion. Something seems irrational, confusing, frightening, get support from somebody who has walked the path, who is integrated, more healed, who has experience. It's good to get a second and a third and a fourth opinion. You know, one of the things that they were saying is don't be a doubting Thomas. I think they were saying this. And yes, doubt can be one of the great enemies or difficulties, stumbling blocks on the path. You know, I'm gonna end this video here, clear up some space, and do another video.